I've been demoted at work. He came home with a somber expression. What? I almost spilled the tea I was drinking. His company's performance has been poor recently, and I knew there were major personnel changes due to restructuring, but I never imagined it would hit Scott directly. Still, I think it's important to support him in times like this as his wife. Well, I guess we just had some bad luck. Times are tough, and I'm working too, so don't worry, I responded cheerfully. My name is Catherine, 50 years old. Currently, I'm working full-time in the back office. I live with my husband Scott, who is 2 years older than me, my high school sophomore daughter Julia, and my 72-year-old mother-in-law Ethel. Well, Ethel and I don't always see eye to eye, but since I'm working outside the house, we only see each other when I'm home, so I've decided not to worry about it. I told my daughter, your dad is a bit down because of the demotion, but try to act normally around him. However, Scott started to vent his frustrations, and that venting, well, it's often said that people vent their frustration on those closest to them, those they trust most, and indeed, all of it was directed at me. The next day, as I was cleaning the hallway during my day off, he passed by and suddenly said, "You've put on weight since we got married, haven't you?" Who? Well, I am 50 after all. Even the gynecology pamphlets say that women tend to gain weight around menopause. But according to my company's health checkup, I'm not overweight, I replied. Then he said, forget the health checkup. Your figure is too unsightly. You're just being lazy. If you're overweight, I'm embarrassed to be seen with you and your barrel-like figure. I was at a loss for words when my husband suddenly said such a heartless thing. Then he said, ugly, and locked himself in his room. What? What's happening all of a sudden? I pinch my own side. I can pinch it. When I pinch it with my thumb and forefinger, it fits snugly with the curve, and I can tell that I've gained more than enough. But why now, all of a sudden? I felt as if I had been pierced by an arrow that had come flying at me out of the blue. So much so that I forgot I was holding the magician wiper in my hand. It was that much of a shock. The wiper slipped from my hand, clattering loudly as it fell onto the hallway floor. From that day on, Scott's attitude towards me became increasingly harsh. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law seemed to have listened to that weekend's argument, and she jumped on it. Then the power doubled. As I was climbing the stairs with a laundry basket, intending to hang the clothes, my mother-in-law descended from the second floor. No, she didn't descend, she just waited at the top of the stairs. She'd remark things like, oh, how awful. If only you weren't so fat, we could pass each other on the stairs. I wouldn't have to wait here because only one person can pass due to your obesity. Furthermore, when I served fried chicken for dinner, she'd say, isn't this what's making you fat? And would remove my plate. She'd suggest that the three of us who aren't overweight should eat. My gynecologist told me after middle age, you either get fat or you lose weight. But my mother-in-law was on the thin side. My mother-in-law was skinny like a dried-up tree. But I was still able to tolerate her petty harassment. Such nuisances had been commonplace, so I was somewhat used to it. What really pierced my heart was my husband's behavior. Since that incident, my husband Scott stopped talking to me. There was no thank you, or that was delicious. Even when I served him breakfast, he just silently ate and then got up. He'd silently enter and leave the bathroom. We still shared the bedroom, but he just turned his back and played with his smartphone. I couldn't stand being treated as if I were invisible. One night in the bedroom, I gathered my courage and asked, hey, did I do something to deserve being ignored? He responded, not really, but I just don't want to talk to anyone other than humans. He went on to say, I don't want to be seen as a family with someone this fat. If you care about me, lose some weight. Huh? I was disheartened by his words, but it's inevitable after middle age, and you know it, right? Even though I walk 1.2 miles for commuting, I'm trying my best in my own way. Indeed, I was trying hard to combat the weight gain due to aging, but he coldly turned his back, saying if the results aren't showing, it's the same as not trying. Don't talk to me anymore. From then on, he truly stopped responding to me. My mother-in-law continued to tease me about my weight, and whenever meat, fruits, or rice were on the table, she'd question, Are you allowed to eat that? Are you aware? And I ended up being able to only eat salads and boiled vegetables. Scott just watched all of this without saying a word, only moving his chopsticks in silence. I may be at the end of my marriage. I began packing my belongings in my spare time. If I'm going to be treated as hair by Scott, then maybe it would be better to just become invisible. When I told my daughter, I'm thinking about going back to my parents' house, she responded, yeah, I get it. I've seen Grandma and Dad always pick on you during meal times. It's hard to watch. I'll go with you, Mom. We can live in your parents' house, and I can still go to high school from there. And now, tomorrow is the day when the demotion I've known about for a while kicks in, right after the winter break. Scott came over with a smile, saying, let's have a drink, everyone, just this once. Starting tomorrow, the life without subordinates will begin for him. I wonder if he finds that unbearable, but by this time I've lost the will to go along with it. Even his plastered-on smile is irritating. Scott says, let's have a nightcap during dinner. I'll make wine spritzers. This might be the first time he's spoken to me since the day after the announcement of his demotion. He adds, Julia can have juice, and I'll make a wine spritzer for you too, Catherine. Then he places the prepared wine spritzers at 3 spots on the table. Strange, why all of a sudden? When Scott turned his back for a moment to look for the TV remote, I sniffed the drink he had made. What I smelled faintly, but I sniffed the drink. Definitely that smell. I recognize the faint smell because I've used it in cooking before. How could he think to make me drink this? I won't stand for it anymore. My mother-in-law's harassment, being ignored by my husband. I'll pay them all back. The wine spritzer pushed me over the edge. I'm sorry, could you get the camembert cheese from the fridge, Scott? It's from a local dairy farm and it's really delicious. I'm glad for the family time. Could you fetch it? Thinking he should at least do that much, when I expressed joy at family time, Scott headed towards the fridge. While he was away and before my mother-in-law and daughter sat down, I switched my drink with the one on the seat to my right, the right seat. It was Ethel's seat. Scott returned with the cheese. Well, now that we've got the snacks ready, I'll call Julia and mother-in-law. I said loud enough for them to hear. Dinner's ready. The two of them made their way to the dining room and took their seats, just a regular dinner, except I didn't have any meatloaf or cornbread salad. Stewed chicken soup and cheese and wine spritzer. Julia was having juice. Let's eat. Julia was the one who broke the silence. Scott and my mother-in-law remained silent. I sipped on the wine spritzer Scott had made. He was watching me closely. I smiled and said, yeah, it's good. Scott murmured something under his breath, but I ignored him. I dug into the salad and then took another sip of the wine spritzer. Suddenly, a beam of red liquid shot out from my mother-in-law, reminding me of Godzilla's fire breath. Wait, what, Grandma? What happened? My daughter stood up in surprise. Some of the liquid splashed her salad. Did you choke? Are you okay? Julia grabbed a towel and quickly returned, but as she handed the towel to my mother-in-law, who wiped her mouth, Julia voiced out in shock, Grandma, your mouth. It looks like spicy cod roe. My mother-in-law began to freak out. Hey you, he put it in my drink, she shrieked and lunged at me. I coldly brushed her hand away. It wasn't me, Scott made it. Being brushed off for the first time and hearing that Scott was responsible for the dish must have been quite a shock. What? My mother-in-law screamed, her lips still covered in sauce, then turned to look at Scott. He was shaking. I leaned towards Scott, resting my hand on the table to exert some pressure. You thought you could hide it in the wine spritzer, didn't you? I could smell it a little because I've used it before. That was a drop of hell, wasn't it? Drop of hell. I had bought it at the food fair in Alabama. It's not as famous as death sauce, but because it has a hint of lime, I liked it more for its homey taste. That hint of lime was what I smelled, which means he mixed a considerable amount into the drink. My mother-in-law must not have noticed due to the smell of the wine spritzer or thought the lime smell was part of the flavoring. That's probably why she drank it. But regardless, this was a seriously malicious prank, extremely vicious. Wait, Dad did that? Julia wore a shocked expression. I actually intended for Catherine to drink it, Scott confessed. You should exchange it with yours, frothing at the mouth. Mother-in-law is also out of line. As soon as she found out it was meant for me, she wants to push it on to me. No way am I switching to that dangerous drink. I said in a low voice, maintaining my pressure on Scott. And then I cornered him. Explain why on earth you thought of doing something so outrageous. He replied, you were staying chubby and spicy food boosts metabolism, so I thought I'd make it. Wow, that's pathetic. What a lame excuse, I laughed sarcastically. Did he really think that explanation would be acceptable? Utterly embarrassing, pressured, my husband hesitated and slightly moved his chair back. I'm not crazy. This is a legitimate reason to support your diet. Here, exchange this with your cup and drink it. I made it for you. My husband retreated. I closed in. My husband retreated. What are you saying? As the one who made it, you should taste it to see if it's delicious. Come on. When I got up, I took the cup containing a drop of hell in front of my mother-in-law and threw it in front of my husband. I put it aside, then I moved my face closer again. After ignoring me and treating me like air for so long, did you think I would honestly drink something you said you would make with a smile out of the blue? Didn't it occur to you in your empty head? Isn't it too childish? Come on, taste it. As the one who cooked it, you should take responsibility. I slammed the table. At that sound, my husband, thinking he could escape with a little more backpedaling, stood up from his chair and backed off. After a tense silence, a quiet voice spoke. My husband and I turned to the source of the voice. The voice came from our daughter, Julia. Julia started to speak as if she was squeezing out the words, taking your frustration out on Mom, who supports you the most when things don't go well at work, and repeating cruel treatments. This is like a childish prank. I might not be supposed to say this to my parents, but it's too childish and unbearable to watch. Our daughter stood up too, and she continued, facing her father, is it wrong to be overweight? Mom wakes up early and walks to work, and she also brings lunch, so it's not like she's not trying. Then she turned to her grandmother, and you're going along with it, taking away my mom's dinner like fried chicken. What Grandma is doing is like middle school seniors and juniors. It's embarrassing. At those words, a flustered Ethel began to make a confused excuse. That's not it. I'm just worried that Julia's mom won't gain any more weight. She must want to be seen favorably by her granddaughter. In fact, Ethel liked Julia. But this time, Julia was harsh. Compassion is something that is conveyed to the other person. It hurt to see Mom's dinner. Despite Mom looking sad, I wouldn't call that compassion. Mom hasn't had any issues in her checkups, but still taking away her side dishes is just mean. Ethel fell silent, and another thing. It seemed Julia was done talking to Ethel for the time being. She turned back to her father. To her father, Mom goes to the gynecologist every month and keeps herself active, but despite all that, Dad just ignores her because she's put on some weight. What's his deal? That atmosphere he creates by ignoring her makes the house feel so tense. Can't he see that? Even Colonel Sanders and Aunt Stella from the cookie ads are plump. There's a term called happy weight, you know? If she gets older and becomes a lovely grandmother like Aunt Stella, I'd be thrilled. When I have kids and she's become a grandma, wouldn't it be great to say, Mom, you've come to some happy weight, and laugh about it? That's my dream. Could you please not ruin it for me? Her gaze was cold as ice as she spoke matter-of-factly. However, her words warmed my heart like hot milk to go with cookies. It's a pathetic sight to see a father scorned by his own daughter. And one more thing, she directed her words at her father. If you're going to ignore someone because of the weight gain due to aging, you should realize that with your thinning hair, you could easily be overlooked yourself. The tension was palpable at the dinner table. Her biting words had brought a chill to the living room. It felt so cold. You'd think that even a banana would freeze. It seemed she had said all she wanted to. After sighing, she turned to me. That's enough, Mom. It's time to let it go. It will be better for you. Her words took me aback. It would be better if I let go. That's right, you should let it go. As I said earlier, my dream is to see you holding my child, saying you've gained some happy weight and laughing. For my sake, I want you to be happy because that's part of my dream. So please, let it go, be happy, and fulfill my dream. Her words filled my heart. Every single thing she said made me so happy that I didn't care about being ignored by my husband, the fat shaming from my mother-in-law, or the drink issue. Warm tears streamed down my cheeks. Yes, you're right. My vision blurred up with tears. Hurry up, Mom. She patted my back and gave me a gentle push. Okay. I went to the kitchen and brought back a document I had been hiding for some time. What? My husband let out a startled exclamation. After about a month of being ignored, I started thinking, I have my bags packed. Let's each go our separate ways. I presented the divorce papers with only my name written on them. I just wanted you to lose some weight. If you had slimmed down as I asked, I would have been content. I only realized it was venting after Julia pointed it out, but since you didn't lose any weight, I thought I'd torment you more. I didn't mean for this, To. I didn't expect this to happen. My husband began to panic. It's on those who didn't notice until things got serious, and what they're so upset about is incredibly childish, my daughter Julia retorts sharply. Living without her adorable granddaughter is no joke for my mother-in-law, it seems. In a panic, my mother-in-law Ethel interjects, Hey, Julia, you want to keep living with us, your grandmother's, don't you? In a voice as soft as stroking a cat. To this, Julia says, I decline. I don't want to breathe the same air as people who act like middle schoolers anymore, shutting down Ethel's plea. Oh, hold on, okay. I got it. I'll taste it as you say. I'll take responsibility as the one who cooked it. Scott picks up the glass placed before him and gulps it all down at once. Just like Ethel earlier, Scott spews a stream of the red liquid from his mouth, resulting in a striking set of lobster-like lips. There, see? I took responsibility, right, Julia? Julia takes a picture of both of them with their lobster lips on her phone and says, Both of you, so lame. Mom, let's go, before exiting the living room. Yeah, I decide to follow her. So what's left behind is a dinner table splashed here and there with wine cocktail mixed with a drop of hell and a husband and mother-in-law with red lobster lips. I return to my parents' house with Julia. When we explained the situation at home, both my mother and father were furious and went to confront Scott and Ethel. They brought back the divorce papers and I ended up getting divorced. My ex-husband Scott has hit rock bottom in his career and ended up spending his remaining years without any significant achievements. Apparently, he had a habit of ignoring things he didn't like even with his subordinates, and that led to his demotion, which I heard about just recently. On the other hand, my ex-mother-in-law Ethel, who had been difficult and rarely went outside, seems to be stuck in a stalemate in a two-person household. Eventually, I got a call saying, if you and Julia were here, it wouldn't be so stale. This is proven by the 17 years since Julia was born, and we lived together. Please come back. I'll stop ignoring you, but there's no way I'm going back. Better gain weight while you can. Once you have grandchildren, you'll have more physical work to do. My mother jokes with a smile. That's true. Today, as always, I'm walking to work. On the way, my boss drives by and stops the car, offering, Want a lift? No thanks, I'm on a diet. Just get in, Catherine. Yes, I found a new boyfriend. Both of us have been divorced once, but because of that, we've both been through a lot and understand each other well. Dieting is good and all, but it would be a problem if you're late, he says while driving. I've never been late before, I respond, puffing up my cheeks. He glances my way and prods my puffed-up cheek with his finger. Give me the time you saved by riding in the car today for our conversation, he says,